Chapter the 15th. To boldly go where no man has ever gone before. In Harry's old age, he would fail to remember how he had managed to get through his exams when he half expected Voldemort to throw him a surprise party around every corner. It took him over an hour and a half to go anywhere, always one at the ready, checking behind every door and in every trash can. Yet the days crept on by just as they had for almost a full year, and with each passing hour he had no doubt that Fuzzy was still alive and kicking behind the locked door. It was sweltering hot, especially in the large classroom where they did their written papers. Wizards didn't have air conditioning and the students were still forced to wear their full uniform robes. They had all been hexed with special charms which would physically crush one's body to half its size if anyone attempted to cheat. They had hands-on exams as well. Professor Flitwick called them one by one into his bedroom to see if they could locate his false teeth with one flick of the wrist. Professor Hardcastle McCormick watched them turn yesterday's leftover dinner into a very rare American baseball card. Points were given for how mint condition the card was, but taken away if it had food stains or smelled like fish. Snape made them all edgy, breathing down their necks and sniffing their hair while they tried to remember how to make a forgetfulness potion. Sadly, this required boiling the solution when half ready, or the effect would last for days if not weeks. If not properly careful, or in many cases just plain lucky, bubbles would form and pop, spraying the potion all over its maker. This of course led to several students instantly forgetting how to not only finish the potion but everything about their next exam as well. Harry did his best to ignore the continuous stabbing pain in his forehead, which had been bothering him ever since his trip into the forest. Neville assumed Harry had a bad case of the heebie-jeebies because Harry couldn't sleep and tossed and turned all night. But the truth was that Harry secretly kept being woken up by all this pain in his scar and kept getting worse and worse with each passing night. He didn't bother telling Ron or Hermione or Madame Pom-Pom about it for fear they would find him crazy. Their very absolute last examination was Chronicle of Magic. A 1-hour oral exam of answering questions about loony old wizards or legendary magical mayhem occurrences, and they'd be free at last. Harry's exam was scheduled for 2:30 a.m. while Ron's was at 5 in the morning. Hermione had to wait till after breakfast. When the ghost of Professor Binns told Harry he was a real letdown after he had finished answering all the questions, Harry couldn't help but feel demoralized. But he stayed up until Ron had completed his and then partied hard all that morning. "That was far tougher than I thought it would be," said Ron as they joined the crowds flocking to breakfast later on. "I had to recite the 1637 Werewolf Code of Conduct in its entirety, and I knew nothing about the uprising of Queen Elizabeth II. Later that day, after a hearty 3-hour Gorgefest breakfast, they still didn't feel sleepy even after the grueling night they just experienced, so they wandered down to the lake and flopped down under a tree. The Weasley twins and Lee Jordan were tickling each other, who were also basking in the warm sunshine of freedom. No more schoolwork, Ron sighed happily, stretching out on the grass, hands behind his head. "Just think, only 6 short years of this nonsense and then we'll be home free. You could be a little more happy, Harry. We've got a whole week before we find out how bad we've done. There's no need to freak out yet." Harry was rubbing his forehead vigorously. "I can't take it anymore," he burst out angrily. "My scar keeps hurting. It's happened before, but never this bad for this long." "Go to Madame Pom-Pom," the wretched Hermione suggested, who was walking up from behind. "Oh, it's you," Ron yawned. "Shouldn't you be somewhere, losing more points for Gryffindor or something?" Ron couldn't get worked up, it was too hot and the sleepiness started to settle in. Hermione just glared at him. Harry nodded in agreement, but he couldn't jiggle off a prowling sensation that there was something he'd overlooked, something utterly imperative that he must remember. When he frustratingly tried to explain this, Hermione said, No, that's just the stress of exam week. I woke up in the middle of the night and was 2.5 hours through my transfiguration notes before I remembered we'd already done that one. Harry was completely sure the unsettling feeling brewing inside him had nothing to do with petty schoolwork. He watched a pig flutter towards the school across the intensely blue sky, a note shoved in its snout. Hagrid was the only one who annoyed him with those blasted letters. How'd you and your friends like to come over for some cups o' cheddar? Care for some cheddar, Harry? The cheese is mighty fine today, Harry. Come and get some after your classes. Every other day it seemed Hagrid was sending him invitations for this strange wizarding ritual. Harry started to ignore them altogether a few months into the school year, but they still continued to come even to this day. The only reason he bothered to visit Hagrid was when there was information to be gotten out of him. He was the absolute worst at keeping secrets and probably blurts out his bank account numbers to several strangers each time he goes shopping. Actually, that's probably why he lives in that shacky old hut. Can't keep a kissy to his name. How Dumbledore trusts him, Harry will never know. All of Hagrid's secrets are probably well known to many, including how to. Harry suddenly did a dramatic kip up. Where exactly do you think you're going? Said Ron sleepily. I've just thought of something, said Harry. He had turned ultra pale white. We've got to go and see Hagrid. Now. Why? Wheezed Hormone, hurrying to keep up. There's no time to explain. Harry panted, scrambling up the grassy slope. But of course there is. Hagrid's hut is at least 5 minutes away, even at a good run, puffed Ron. But Harry, prancing across the grounds toward the forest, didn't answer. 7.5 minutes of silent running later, they arrived at Hagrid's hut. He was rocking in an armchair outside his house, stroking his shotgun. Fang was passed out next to him. Oh hello, he said, smiling. Finished your exams? Come to get some cup o' cheddar, have you? Oh, yes please, said Ron, but Harry threw out his arm to stop him from walking up. No, we're in a state of urgency. Hagrid, I've got one question to ask and you better give it to me straight. You know that night you got an or but? What did the stranger who approached you look like? Dunno, said Hagrid casually as he continued to rock. Wouldn't take his cloak off, he wouldn't. He saw Harry raise his eyebrows to epic levels and fling his mouth open in shock. It's not that unusual. Hogshead is a wretched hive o' scum and villainy. That's one of the pub down in the village thar. Might have been a dragon dealer, mightn't he? I never saw his face, he kept his hood up. Did chop off a guy's arm though, right as I was walking in. Didn't think too much of it, that kinda thing happens all the time. Harry strolled up and knelt down next to Hagrid and began to speak softly. And what did you talk to him about, Hagrid? Did you mention Hogwarts at all? Might have come up, said Hagrid, straining to remember. Yeah? It was many months ago, but yeah, I remember these details. He asked what I did, and I told him I was head sanitation officer here. He asked a bit about the sort of creatures I took after. So I told him. And I said what I really need was a dragon to add to my collection. And then, I can remember alls too well, 'cause he kept buying me drinks, you see. Yeah, then he said he just happened to have a live dragon egg and would let it go for the right price. But he had to be sure I could handle it, he didn't want it to go to any old home. So I told him, after house training a giant 3-headed dog, a dragon would be easy. And did he appear to be very interested in Fuzzy? Harry asked, trying to keep his voice soft and calm like talking to a child who witnessed a heinous crime. Well, yeah, we talked for ages 'bout him. He was clearly a man o' the critters like me, so I says to him, I says, Fuzzy's a piece o' cake if you know how to calm him down, just a little bit o' aromatherapy does the trick. Vanilla lavender and sandalwood infused cinnamon leaf at a ratio o' 16:9 exactly, and he'll go straight off to sleep. Hagrid abruptly became horrified. Whoops. "I shouldn't have told you that," he blurted out. "Forget all about it. Hey, where do you think you're going?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't speak to each other at all until they came to a halt together in the entrance hall, like it was their instinct to get away from Hagrid as fast as they could and for some reason congregate here, which seemed very cold and gloomy after the grounds. "Do you see? Do you see? We've got to go warn Dumbledore," said Harry. Hagrid blabbed to that stranger how to get past Fuzzy, and it was either Snape or Voldemort under that cloak, I guarantee it, more than George Zimmer. That Hagrid, always spilling his beans. I just hope Dumbledore believes us. Ronan might back us up if Bane doesn't stop him. It's a waste of time to get Hagrid involved in this mess. Where's Dumbledore's office, anyway? They looked around, as if hoping to see the door right off the entrance hall. They had never been told where Dumbledore lived, nor did they know anyone who had been sent to him to be punished. "We'll just have to," Harry began, but a voice suddenly rang across the hall. "How dare you three come back from outside? It is a gorgeous day and your exams have concluded. You should be out frolicking in the sun. I was just about to dump this one by the lake. Seems the exam had gotten the best of him and could use some fresh air." It was Professor Hardcastle McCormick, carrying a tall passed-out third year. "We demand to see Professor Dumbledore," said Hermione, rather heroically. Harry and Ron thought. "Professor Dumbledore?" Professor Hardcastle McCormick repeated, as though this was a very sketchy thing to ask. "How come?" Harry swallowed hard. "Now what?" "It's a secret, between us and him," he said, but he regretted it pretty instantly as Professor Hardcastle McCormick's nostrils flared up in rage. "Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago," she said coldly. "He received an urgent pig from the Ministry of Magic and flew off for Liverpool at once." "He's outta here?" said Harry frantically. "Now? Professor Dumbledore is a very important wizard, Potter. He can't spend all his time monitoring you kids. But it's the most important meeting he'll have all year, believe me. Something you have to say is more important than the Ministry of Magic, Potter?" "Oh, you betcha," said Harry, who had enough toe-tapping around the subject. "Professor, it concerns the Sorcerer's Bone." Whatever Professor Hardcastle McCormick had expected, it wasn't that. The student she was carrying flopped to the floor. He didn't wake up. "How do you know dash?" she stuttered. "Professor, I think I know that Snape, that someone will be attempting to steal the bone right out from under us. You've just got to let me speak to the Dumbledore." She eyed him with a mixture of shock and suspicion. "Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow," she said finally. "I don't know how you found out about the bone, Potter, but rest assured, no one can possibly steal it, it's too well protected." "That's what you think, Potter. I know what I'm talking about," she said shortly. She bent down and picked the student back up. "I advise you all go back outside and relish in the sunshine." But they didn't. "It's all going down right now," said Harry, once he was sure Professor Hardcastle McCormick was out of earshot. "Snape's gone through the trapdoor. He's found out everything he needs, apparently ages ago, and now he's got Dumbledore out of the way too. He sent that note. I bet it will be a real shocker when Dumbledore turns up to the Ministry of Magic. Wonder why he took the slow way and didn't just apparat? Oh, but when I get my hands on Snape, I'm gonna..." Hermione gasped. Harry and Ron swung round. Snape was standing there. "Good afternoon," he said with no enthusiasm. A 2-minute staring match ensued. "You shouldn't be inside on a day like today," he said, looking up and away. "People will think you're up to something. And Gryffindor can't really afford to lose any more points, can they? What are you, behind Slytherin by 1500 is it?" 1467, Harry snapped back. "Be warned, Potter, Any more questionable wanderings and I will personally make sure you are expelled. A jolly good day to you all. Now, I have some business to attend to." He strode off in the direction of the bathroom. Harry turned to the others. "Right, it's time we take matters into our own hands," he whispered urgently. "One of us has got to monitor Snape's whereabouts, wait outside the bathroom and follow him if he leaves it. Hormone, you'd better do that." "What? Why me?" "It's obvious," said Ron. "You can't go in there, so it will be like you're waiting for one of us." He put on a high voice. "Oh, Professor Snape, I'm so worried, Harry's been in there an awfully long time." "Oh, shut up," said Hormone. "Wouldn't he know you weren't in there though?" But she agreed to go and spy on Snape anyway. "And we'd better patrol the third-floor corridor," Harry told Ron like a general commanding his troops. "Come on." But that part of the plan didn't work. No sooner had they reached the door separating Fuzzy from the rest of the school than Professor Hardcastle McCormick turned up again, and this time, she lost her mind. "And I suppose you think you first years have a better chance at stopping whoever it is from getting through than the entire combined force of that which is protecting the bone?" she stormed. "Ha! Enough of this nonsense. If I catch wind you've come within 500 feet of here again, I'll take another 5,000 points from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own house." Harry and Ron waltzed back to the common room. Harry had just said, "At least Hormone's on Snape's tail," as the portrait of the fat bikini lady swung open for them to step through, but Hormone was just inside. "I'm sorry, Harry," she sobbed. "Snape came out and asked me what I was doing, so I said I was waiting for a friend, and Snape went back in to get him, and I've only just got away, and in a panic I came back here. I don't have any idea where Snape is." "Well, we're completely screwed then, aren't we?" Harry said. The other two sat down, ashamed. "That's it," Harry abruptly stated angrily. "I'm getting out of here tonight and going to take a stab at getting to the bone first." "You're absolutely bonkers," said Ron. "You can't," said Hormone. "After what Hardcastle McCormick and Snape have said, you'll be expelled. PSH, empty threats. I'm Harry Hero to all Potter," Harry shouted. "Don't you understand? I'm everyone's Lord and Savior, Master and Commander. A god among mere men. They won't do anything. Dumbledore needs me for my image. Professor Hardcastle McCormick herself said I've got the Potter privilege and can't be touched. Plus Voldemort's coming back. I'm the only one who's ever stopped him, and I'll stop him again. I know he'll kill me for sure after he comes back, and I'm too precious of a snowflake to just sit here and take it. If I'm dead, then who will everyone look up to? There certainly won't be any Hogwarts left to get expelled from either. He'll turn this place into a dump and invite in all the riffraff. A measly Hogwarts diploma doesn't matter to me if I'm dead. Can't you see? It's a fight to the death. Me or him. I'm going through that trapdoor tonight to get the bone, and I'm going to kill whoever dares try to get in my way." He glared at them, fire burning in his eyes. He was thirsty for blood. And blood Harry shall have. "You're completely right, Harry," said Hormone in a small voice, looking down at her toes. "I'll use the invisibility ring. I'll be super safe from harm that way," said Harry. "But will it conceal all three of us?" said Ron. All three of us?" Harry questioned. He did not want the others tagging along. "Oh, come off it, you don't think we'd let you have all the fun? There's an adventure to be had. And I want in." Hormone added quickly. "Not I, how dare you just assume that I would want to partake in such a disastrous plan. But if we get caught, we'll blame it all on you again and get expelled too." Ron shot back. All right, fine," said Hormone grimly. "Flitwick told me a secret memory charm that will rewind someone's thoughts 5 minutes. So if we run into someone it will be like we were never there. I'll go practice. Where's Neville? After dinner, where they all three pigged out considerably since it may very well have been their last meal, the three of them sat nervously apart in the common room. Nobody bothered them, none of the Gryffindors had anything to say to Hermione anymore, after all. She continued to be annoyed by this. Harry and Ron didn't talk much either. Both of them were in deep thought about the task at hand, contemplating death. Slowly, the common room became a whole lot less common as people coasted off to bed. "Better get the ring," Ron muttered, as Lee Jordan finally left. Harry ran upstairs, probably waking everyone who had fallen asleep. He pulled out the ring from a cereal box he had hidden it in and scarfed down his one last chocolate from Christmas, in case he wouldn't ever come back. He placed the last will and testament of Mr. Harry J. Potter he had written out earlier on top of his pillow just in case too. Harry ran back down to the common room, again feet pounding hard on the metal stairs as he didn't pay no mind. "We'd better try out the ring here, and make sure it conceals all three of us, if Filch spots one of our body parts wandering along on its own." "What's all this then?" said a voice from behind an armchair facing a corner. It spun around, scraping the floor. Neville appeared, petting Trevor the Toad, who looked as though he'd been making another bid for sweet freedom. "Nothing, Neville, nothing," said Harry, who tossed the ring aside in a panic. It wound up hooking a suit of armor and caused it to disappear, but luckily Neville didn't seem to notice. Neville squinted at their guilty faces. "You're going out on the town again, aren't you?" he said. No, said Hermione. "No, we're not, believe me. We got more important things to take care of. Why don't you go to bed, Neville?" "Don't change the subject," he snapped back. Harry looked at the grandfather clock by the door. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Dumbledore has been gone for hours and they've just been dilly-dallying around all day. Snape could have very well stolen the bone ages ago and be halfway to Switzerland by now with his BFF Voldemort. "You can't go out," said Neville, "you'll be caught again. Gryffindor will be in even more trouble." "You can't fathom what's at stake here," said Harry. "This is my life we're talking about." But Neville was fidgeting around, about to do something desperate. I don't care. I won't allow it," he said, scurrying to obstruct the portrait hole. I'll fight you." Ron sucker punched him right in the jaw. Neville fell to the floor and cowered into a corner. Hermione took a few steps towards him. "Petrificus totalus!" she cried, pointing her wand at Neville. Neville's whole body became rigid, he swayed on all fours, stiff as a board. Only his eyes were moving, twitching around in horror. "Quick! Help me move him into the coat closet," said Hermione, who ran to him. "What have you done to him?" Harry whispered. "It's the full body bind," said Hermione. "It will last for days so we won't need to worry about him squealing to anyone while we're gone. If we survive, I'll preform the counter curse." "And if we don't?" Ron questioned. "Well, it's like you said, we're all dead anyway." "Why didn't you use that memory charm? Would have saved us a bunch of trouble here," said Harry. "Oh yeah, I forgot about that. But let's add that one on so he won't remember who did this to him." Hermione opened the closet door, preformed the charm, and slammed it back shut again. Soon, they were scampering through the portrait hole and were on their way after Harry felt around and found the ring. For whatever reason, the halls seemed extra dark tonight. All the shadows from the suits of armor and other odds and ends that filled the corridors gave them the spooks. Around the second corner, however, they spotted Mrs. Norris near the top of a set of stairs. "Oh, let's kick her, just this once. I've never gotten to do it," Ron whispered in Harry's ear. Harry nodded. Ron ran away from holding hands with Harry towards Mrs. Norris, who was looking the other way. Right as Ron got within a few feet of her, Her ears perked up, but it was too late. Ron full-on kicked her so hard she went flying through the air and out a nearby staircase window. This was not something Ron had tried to do but was pure luck, as he explained later. They didn't meet anyone else when they reached the staircase down to the 3rd floor. A few seconds later, they were there, outside the hidden door behind the tapestry, and the door was left ajar as if whoever was already in the wanted any passers-by to know what's going down. "Well, there you are," Harry said quietly, "we're too late." They decided to investigate anyway. As they entered the room, deep rumbling growls met their ears. All 3 of the dogs' noses sniffed madly in their direction, even though it appeared to be asleep. "What's that at its feet?" Hormone whispered. "Looks like some sort of cauldron fire," said Ron. "Oh my gosh!" Hormone exclaimed. "We totally forgot to bring the vanilla lavender and sandalwood infused cinnamon leaf." Right at that moment, the smell of hot cinnamon and vanilla hit their noses. "Oh yeah, I had a feeling we overlooked something. Lucky for us all Snape did something useful for a change. Remind me to thank him later after we catch up and torture him a bit the way he tortured us during the school year," Harry said, feeling a little relieved. They all had a good laugh, then crept toward the trapdoor in the middle of the room. "All right." Ron rubbed his hands together and smacked his lips while he approached the wooden door in the floor. He bent and pulled the ring on top of the trapdoor, which swung up and open. A light white mist poured out from under it. "What can you see?" Hormone said anxiously. "Nothing, just black. There's no way of climbing down. We'll just have to take a leap of faith. Want to go first, Hormone?" "No, I don't." Harry signaled Ron to do it. "You want me to go first?" said Ron. "Yeah, I'm far too valuable to get killed this early, and I need Hormone 'cause she's way smarter than you and can protect me from loads of things later on. So that leaves you." Ron looked down through the trapdoor. There was no sign of the bottom. He gulped. Ron lowered himself through the hole until he was dangling by just his fingertips. Then he looked up at Harry and said, "If anything happens to me, I want you to have my collection of chocolate frog cards, okay?" "Of course," said Harry. "Catch you on the flip side." And Ron let go. Icy cold air rushed past him as he tumbled down, 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 and the second he started to regret committing suicide, flump. With a funny, muffled sort of thump he landed on something soft. He sat up and felt around, his eyes not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of slimy plant. I'm alive." He called up to the light the size of a postage stamp, which was the open trapdoor. "I'm alive, ha ha. It's a soft landing, you can jump." Harry dove in right away, eager to confront Snape. Several seconds later he landed squarely on top of Ron in a painful collision. "Ah, we did not think this through," were his first words. "Hold on, Hormone." But it was too late. She had already jumped and also landed directly on top of both of them. All 3 of them now wiggled around in agony. "Oh, this is the worst pain ever. Quick Hormone, your anti-pain charm." Hormone managed to mutter morphinitis onto herself and then the others. Ron's left arm appeared broken and hung at an odd angle as it appeared to have popped out of its socket, and Hormone did have a big dent in her head, but beyond that and a few other bumps and bruises they were at least all now pain-free. "Wow. We must be miles under the school," Hormone said. "Lucky this plant thing's here," said Ron. With their eyes now adjusting to the dim room, there was a loud cranking noise that echoed through the chamber. All of a sudden, the soft plant that they had landed on began to untangle and retreat away to somewhere they couldn't see. "What happened?" Hormone screamed. "I don't know, it just disappeared," Harry replied. There was another booming echo. "I got a bad feeling about this," Ron stated. There was another loud grinding noise, but this time constant and didn't go away. The walls are moving. Harry yelled. The stone walls on either side of them began moving towards each other. If they didn't do something soon, they'd be crushed. One thing's for sure, we're all going to be a lot thinner, puckered Ron. Don't just stand there, try and brace it with something. Hermione said frantically. With what? There's nothing here. Ron shouted back. Hermione closed her eyes. Let me think, let me think. Harry and Ron both tried to climb up the moving walls, but it was no use, they were too smooth. That's it, shouted Hermione as she took out her wand. Come on Wall, do the locomotion. She flicked at the wall and it instantly stopped, then even began to move back some. I did it, she screamed, but I can only control one wall at a time. Quick, one of you do the other one. Hurry now. It was Harry who got to his wand first. Come on Wall, do the locomotion. They used their respective wands to push the walls back into place and all screamed in joy as if they were dying. We're all right, shouted Harry. A door to their side swung open. This way it shall be, said Harry, pointing down a stone passageway, which was the lone way forward. They sped off down the path, running as fast as they could. The passageway sloped downward and a short ways on Ron tripped and scraped up his face pretty bad. As Hermione mended Ron yet again, Harry, edgy to get going, couldn't help but think this place reminded him of Gringotts. With an unpleasant jolt of the heart, he remembered that dragons are said to be guarding vaults in the wizard's bank. He wondered if a fully grown dragon could tell he killed one of their own, he'd be done for unless he can find a way to kill again. Can you hear something? Ron whispered a short time after they got moving once more. Harry stopped and put his ear to the ground. A soft rustling and clinking sound could be heard. Do you think it's Filch with those blasted chains of his? Ron said, who also put his ears to the ground to have a listen. I don't know. I doubt it. How'd he get down here? Hermione questioned, also getting down on all fours, ear to the floor. Sounds more like wings to me. Wings? How can you hear wings? Asked Harry. As they approached the end of the passageway, Ron stated the obvious. There's light ahead, I can see something moving. Soon before them was a dazzlingly lit golden chamber, its ceiling arching abnormally high above them. It was full of miniature, diamond-bright birds, flapping and fluttering all around the room. On the opposite side of the large chamber, they saw a heavy wooden door. What's all this about? Said Ron. These birds. They can't be here just for ornamentation, said Hermione. They're freakishly reflective. They watched the birds soaring overhead, glittering. They're not birds, Harry said suddenly. They're keys. Winged keys, look carefully. So that must mean. He looked over at the large wooden door again and ran over to it. It was cracked open. And there, in its keyhole, was a large silver key. Its wings were broken off and lying on the floor. The key itself was twitching around in the keyhole like it was in pain and trying to escape. It couldn't though, for it was bent and appeared to have been shoved in with great force. There was also some silver substance trickling off it onto the floor, which they thought must have been magic key blood. This was all the evidence he needed. There was certainly someone down here ahead of them, and it most certainly wasn't Hagrid coming to tame a six-headed cat or what other abomination he may have down here. This was a fresh wound. Harry became even more so determined to stop this madman. They marched onward. The subsequent chamber was so dark they couldn't see anything at all. But then light had suddenly burst into the room to reveal a quite familiar sight. They were standing in the middle of a huge Daedric board, and all around them stood several Daedricmen, which were all much taller than they were and carved from what looked like solid marble. Harry, Ron and Hermione shivered slightly. The towering Daedricmen were quite scary. What do you suppose we do? Harry asked irritably. It's obvious, isn't it? Said Ron. We have no choice but to play our way. Behind one of the pieces they could see another door. How exactly? Said Hormone nervously. I think, said Ron, that we're going to have to be Deidreman. I need to plan out a good strategy before we get going, he said as they took their positions on 3 of the blank spaces. Harry tapped his feet impatiently, watching Ron think for a full 10 minutes. Finally he said, all right, I've got a plan of attack. Don't be offended or anything, but neither of you are any good at Daedric. Harry just rolled his eyes. Right, well we seem to be in position. It's the other side that goes first, said Ron, peering across the board. Yes. Look. A large monarch had moved towards Ron. It swung its mighty club and clobbered Ron square inches the jaw, sending blood spattering across the board. Ron too went flying and landed unconscious many feet away from where he was previously standing. Done. Harry screamed as he threw up his arms and began running towards the other door. Hormone quickly followed. What about Ron? She panted. There's no time. Plus he was supposed to be the Grand Daedric player and all, should have seen that coming. Look. The door's open already, we didn't even have to play. It was true, the door in front of them was slightly ajar leading to the next passageway. Harry pulled the door fully open and stepped through. He and Hormone took off down the hallway. We'll see if Ron is still alive when we come back this way, but I'm not holding my breath. He was hit pretty hard back there. What do you reckon's next? We've had sprouts, that must have been the plant compactor room. I bet Flitwick put charms on those keybirds. Hardcastle McCormick transfigured marble to make the Daedreman come alive, that leaves squirrels dearly, and snapes. They had reached another door. Why don't you go first, in case there's something ready to attack, Harry whispered. Okay, Hormone said hesitantly. Hormone pushed the door open, wondered the ready. But there was nothing very nightmarish in here. Just a booth with 7 differently shaped bottles on the table complete with 3 bar stools and a stuffed scarecrow bartender. Snapes, said Harry. It's got to be Snapes. What do we do? They stepped over the threshold, and immediately silver bars dropped down over both the doorway they entered from and the one on the other side of the room, presumably the one they had to travel through next. They were trapped like rats. Look. Hormone seized a roll of paper lying next to the bottles and began to read. Danger lies before you, while safety lies behind. 2 of us will help you, whichever you would find. 1 among us 7 will let you move ahead. Another will transport the drinker back instead. 2 among our number hold only nettle wine. 3 of us are killers, waiting and bidding time. And it goes on like this. Harry yawned, bored. I'm just going to try one at random and hope for the best. Wait. No. Hormone yelled. But it was too late. Harry had picked up one of the bottles and downed the whole thing in a couple gulps. He set the bottle down hard and wiped his mouth with his arm. Ah. That hits the spot. How do you feel? I feel fine, whoa. At that moment, Harry began to levitate just off the ground. He then zoomed around the bar booth and towards the other door. Right before he was about to slam into it, the bars went back up and the door opened letting him through. Just as he passed into the next room, the door slammed behind him and he could hear the bars go back down again. He was on the other side, in the last chamber. But there was already someone here. It wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort.